Rothschild claimed to be Jewish. Not the nationality of a Jew, but Jew in terms of belief in God and a follower of divine revelation. But was Mr. Rothschild a moral man? Here's a man that had 5 sons, and he sent his 5 sons into 5 countries. One son went to England, one son to France, one to Austria, one to Italy, and another remained in Germany with the father. And from these sons and the money that these sons had, they worked and maneuvered and manipulated until they gained control of the central banks of England, France, Austria, Italy, and Germany. The control of these central banks went into the hands of individuals whose interests were not necessarily in harmony with the best interests of that nation. These privately owned central banks became the printer of the money and the extenders of credit of that particular nation. So government and politics, I wish the politicians didn't have to go. I wish the politicians didn't have to go. But I understand you're very busy. Government and politics in Europe was always controlled by the money interests. Wars were fought, and in order to fight a war, governments had to borrow money. They borrowed money from these central banks. The central banks waxed rich because they loaned money and charged interest, then took over when one side prevails against the other. And when governments could not satisfy the indebtedness, then some of the natural wealth of that country flowed to the bankers. They would loan money to both sides in the conflict, because they really didn't care who won or who lost. It's frightful. Rothschild and Paul Warburg loaned money to Hitler. Hitler killed little Jews, while Rothschild and Warburg stayed in the finest hotels in Europe. But damn it, if you can't call Rothschild anti-Semitic and Warburg an anti-Semite, then don't you open your mouth against me. In a book titled None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen and Larry Abraham on page 45, the question is asked, where do governments get the enormous amounts of money that they need? Most, of course, comes from taxation. But governments often spend more than they are willing to tax from their citizens, so governments are forced to borrow. The public is led to believe that the government borrows from the people through savings bonds. Actually, only the smallest percentage of the national debt
is held by individuals in this form. Most government bonds, except those owned by the government itself through its trust funds, are held by vast banking firms known as international banks. For centuries, there has been big money to be made by international bankers in financing governments and kings. Such operators, however, are faced with certain thorny problems. We know that smaller banks operate to protect themselves by taking collateral. But what kind of collateral can you get from a government or a king? The process through which one collects a debt from a government or a monarch is not a subject taught in the business schools of the universities. And most of us, never having been in the business of financing kings or governments, have not given the problem much thought. But there's a king financing business. And to those who can ensure collection, it is a lucrative business. An economics professor named Stuart Crane notes that there are two means used to loan governments, money to governments and kings, and two means of collecting on that money. Whenever a business firm borrows big money, the creditor obtains an influence in management to protect its investment. Like a business, no government can borrow big money unless that government is willing to surrender to the creditor some of its sovereignty. Certainly, international bankers who have loaned hundreds of billions of dollars to governments around the world command considerable influence in the policies of such governments. But the ultimate advantage, listen to this, that the creditor has over a king or a president is that if the ruler gets out of line, the banker can finance his enemy or his rival. Therefore, if you want to stay in the lucrative financing business of kings and governments, it is wise to have an enemy or a rival waiting in the wings to unseat every king or every president to whom you lend money. If the king doesn't have an enemy, you gotta be able to create one. Now I'm going to show you why America is in so much debt. The founding fathers of this nation said they did not want private control of a central bank because to them such a bank would be the detriment of this democracy. Thomas Jefferson saw a privately owned central bank as worse than an opposing army. Thomas Jefferson wanted to keep America free from those things that led to the destruction of many nations and governments in Europe. And so a privately owned central bank was unthinkable to the founding fathers of this nation, and therefore it was written in the Constitution that only Congress should have the right to print the money and the instruments of credit. The debt of America is so great that greater hardship is now being planned by the government for the masses of the American people in order to make America solvent. Please, wake yourself up now. Come on. Come on. If you got to stand up and breathe, stand up. Stretch yourself. I'm winding this down, so come on, I don't want you to sleep now. Give me some water. Are you all right? Okay, sit down. You refreshed? Good, I am too. Let's get rolling. The great sweep in the November elections that brought the Republicans into the control of the Senate and the House of Representatives and the majority of the governor's mansion of this nation sent a message to the government that the American people are greatly disturbed over the course of this nation, and they all are seeking change. The majority of the American people may not know what change they want, but they definitely desire change for the better. The Republican Party has come up with a theme. They call it a contract with America. This contract or agreement is to reform the government in such a way where great amounts of money can be saved, spending is to be brought in line, taxes are to be reduced. But this contract with America, to many seems, in gangster terminology, to be a contract on America, where the contract says the poor and the weak must be eliminated. There is no way that the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, or Senator Dole, or the Republican Party can solve the problem of the tremendous debt of this nation without exposing the root of this problem and the conspiracy that brought America to her wretched debtor condition. Every home needs a balanced budget. A balanced budget means that we do not spend more than we take in or have debt greater than our ability to handle without over-borrowing that will destroy the economy of our homes. Serious financial problems are at the root of most of our domestic quarrels. The tremendous stress on the breadwinners in the American family is such that this stress leads to spousal abuse. Women abusing the men, men abusing their wives, the abuse of the children, the breakup of the family. So balancing the budget at home is one of the keys to a stable family environment. Since this is so in individual homes, it is also true in the larger context, the country, the nation. The nation called America is going toward $5 trillion in public debt. This debt is so great that in order to balance the budget, such drastic cuts have to be made that the poor and the weak will suffer the most. So this contract with America is a contract on America's poor. Even the thought of raising the age level at which time the elderly will receive Social Security to 70 years of age is a sign that the Social Security of those who have paid into it is in deep trouble. The government, if it raises the age limit to 70, is betting that most of those who paid into this fund will never live to see 70 years of age, and therefore Social Security will not have to be paid. Thank you. This is a disgrace. But what is the root of the problem? How did America get into? You know, the president just sent a budget up to Congress of $1.6 trillion. Yet, in 1991, the last year that we have knowledge of what America took in taxes, America took in a little over $1 trillion in taxes, which means that if the budget this year or next year is going to be $1.6 trillion, then where will the $600 billion come from to satisfy the budget? At this rate, if America cuts taxes and yet is increasing its budget, by the time Clinton leaves office, if he only has one term, the country will be $6 trillion in debt. At $4 trillion in debt, to pay the interest on that debt in 1991 was $288 billion, nearly 1/3 of what the government took in taxes. If the debt reaches $6 trillion, practically every penny that comes in tax revenue will have to be paid to service the debt, which technically means that the country will be bankrupt. This condition of great debt has placed America at the mercy of those to whom she is indebted. On page 47 of this same book, They Dare Call It Conspiracy, by Gary Allen and Mr. Abraham, it reads, listen, quote, "Since the keystone of the international banking empire has been government bonds, it has been in the interest of these international bankers to encourage government debt. The higher the debt, the more the interest. And nothing drives governments into debt like a war. And it has not been an uncommon practice among international bankers to finance both sides of the bloodiest military conflicts. For example, during the Civil War, the American North was financed by Rothschild through their American agent, August Belmont. And the American South was financed through the Erlangers, who were Rothschild's relatives. But while wars and revolutions have been used by international bankers in gaining or increasing control over governments, the key to such control has always been control of money. You can control a government if you have that government in your debt. A creditor is in a position to demand the privileges of monopoly from the sovereign. Oh man, this is heavy stuff. Governments that are seeking money have granted monopolies in state banking, natural resources, oil concessions, and transportation to the bankers. However, the monopoly which the international financiers most covet is to gain control over a nation's money. Eventually, these international bankers actually owned as private corporations the central bank of various European nations. The Bank of England, the Bank of France, the Bank of Germany were not owned by their respective governments, as almost everyone imagined. They were privately owned monopolies granted by the head of state, usually in return for loans. Under this system, observed Reginald McKenna, president of the Midlands Bank of England, he said, quote, "Those that create and issue the money and credit direct the policies of government and hold in their hands the destiny of the people."
Go ahead, Minister, go ahead.
Now, most of you think, most Americans think, that the Federal Reserve banking system is owned by the federal government as the representatives of the American people. But the Federal Reserve Bank is a privately owned banking institution. On page 59 of this same book, it reads, "The Federal Reserve controls our money supply and interest rates and thereby manipulates the entire economy, creating inflation or deflation, recession or boom, sending the stock market up or down at whim. The Federal Reserve is so powerful that the former Congressman Wright Patman, who was the former chairman of the House Banking Committee, said, in the United States, we have in effect two governments. We have the duly constituted government, then we have an independent, uncontrolled, uncoordinated government in the Federal Reserve System, operating the money powers which are reserved to Congress by the Constitution. Neither presidents, nor congressmen, nor secretaries of the Treasury direct the Federal Reserve. In the matters of money, the Federal Reserve directs them." This was written about 30 years ago. Well, is it so today? Recently, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Mr. Alan Greenspan, came before Congress to hint to the Congress that the Fed would raise interest rates again. So for the 7th time in a year, interest rates have been raised. The chairman of the board of General Motors and Ford is now seeking an audience with Mr. Greenspan to plead with him not to raise the interest rates any further. And if Mr. Greenspan agrees, this will be the first time, according to what we have read, that the Federal Reserve has agreed to sit down directly with the heads of business. The Federal Reserve sits down with the heads of government.
Go ahead, Minister, go ahead.
Why would business plead to the Federal Reserve not to raise interest rates? Why couldn't Congress order the Federal Reserve not to raise the interest rates? If you watch Congress, when they deal with Mr. Greenspan, they don't play with him, because Mr. Greenspan is the representative of a shadow government that literally dictates the monetary policies of this nation. Now, do you remember a few weeks ago when the Mexican peso was in trouble? Against the wishes of the American people and the Congress, President Clinton ordered $20 billion of the American taxpayers' money to be used to bail out the peso.
Think about it.
But who was President Clinton helping? Was he acting on his own? Or was he being directed by powerful forces that the American people don't know anything about? According to what we have read, the bailout don't save the common Mexican peasant. The bailout doesn't save the poor businessman of Mexico. It saves the international bankers who have invested heavily in Mexico. Who ordered the bailout? Since the president is supposed to act on the will of the American people, and the American people said no, and the Congress said no, who told Clinton you better do it?
Go ahead, Minister. Go ahead.
You know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us that the Prime Minister of England may appear to be the leader, but he goes back behind the door to unseen forces that direct his motion. And believe it or not, so it is with the American president. The American people feel that voting for the president is voting for the man who has supreme power to direct the course of this nation for the next 4 years. But there's another power in America called the Federal Reserve that is a power unto themselves. How did the control of the federal banking system come into private control against the wishes of the founding fathers of the nation? And what was written in the Constitution, and what was the purpose of that? Have you noticed how politicians bow to people with money? Well, what makes you think that your vote counts? It is money that buys political influence and oftentimes political elections. It is money, special interests that dictate in a large measure the vote of politicians in city council, in state legislature, and in the federal government of the United States. It is the big international bankers who are in control of many of the world's governments. But how did this happen to America? The financial woes of this country produce a ripple effect throughout the earth. The financial woes of America are causing the undoing of the social fabric of this nation. The people are grossly dissatisfied with the politics and the politicians of America. The people are wondering how the president and the Congress could loan money to other governments and give money away with the infrastructure of this nation crumbling and the debt is spiraling. How could America give away money when the country is in need? There are millions of homeless people living under bridges. Brothers and sisters, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in saying that when America went off the gold and silver standard, her financial doom was sealed, this is a very big statement, because the financial doom of a nation brings down its government. When Germany lost the value of the German mark, the government went down right behind it. Whoever and for whatever reason, America was taken away from the gold and silver standard that made her financial doom something that is bound to happen, then those same traitors are responsible for ultimately bringing about the ruin of the government of the United States. Now, let's close. Don't move, don't move. Did you know that from 1900 to 1913, the federal government had a very manageable debt into the millions of dollars? But in 1913, something happened. 4 things were set up in the year 1913. First, the Federal Reserve Bank, the IRS, the FBI, and the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith all were set up in the same year. Is that a coincidence, or is there a tie-in? I don't have time to go into all the details, but by the help of Allah, I'll do that in further writings if it is the will of Allah. But it's enough to say that two German Jews, Paul and Felix Warburg, and the international bankers of Europe wined and dined a senator named Nelson Aldrich, who was the maternal grandfather of Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller. And they wined and dined him for 2 years, showing him the central banks of Europe. Senator Aldrich came back to America and was given the job of being a part of the national study of the national monetary system. Nelson Aldrich with Paul Warburg had a secret meeting in Jekyll Island, Georgia, off the coast of Georgia. And in that secret meeting, what came out of it was the basis of the Federal Reserve Act. They tried to get it through Congress under the name the Aldrich Federal Reserve Act. But since Aldrich was so tied to the international banking system, the members of Congress under the leadership of President Taft, they voted it out. So they went back to the drawing board and they redid it. And they pushed it through on December the 22nd, 1913, just as Congress was about to break for the Christmas recess. Wanting to get home quick, they pushed it through. And the Federal Reserve Act became law. But in 1912, there was a great presidential election where William Taft was challenged in his own party by Teddy Roosevelt. Both Roosevelt was financed by some of these international bankers. They hated Taft for his derailing of the Aldrich Federal Reserve Act. So they wanted to get at Taft. But they felt that a Republican shouldn't bring this act before Congress. It would be better if it came through a Democrat. So they same bankers put money behind Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson sold the American presidency to the international bankers. He was elected in 1912, and in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act became law, and the Central Bank of the United States was taken over by a group of private banking institutions. Then somebody else began printing the money. Like Rothschild said, he don't care who rules as long as he controls the purse strings. In 1913, America was not yet at war. In the last winter solstice of the 6,000-year rule of the enemy, America was betrayed by one of her presidents and one of her senators and one of her members of the United States Treasury. Do you know why I'm teaching this subject on Jesus Saves? Because after I say what I'm saying today, if I ain't got a Savior, I'm sure going to need one after I say what I say today. Let me just finish. Don't be frightened for me. You better be frightened for yourself. Because some stuff is going down in America right now as we speak. That all our lives are in danger right now. And I've got to sound the alarm, brothers and sisters. I don't care nothing about my life. It's your life that I want to save. Listen, now that the bank that prints money is in the hands of private interests, the idea is to push up and inspire the government to borrow. How do you do it? Get America into war. The war in Europe started in 1914. And by 1917, under a lie about the Lusitania being sunk by German subs, the American people were called into a war to end all wars. Oh, this is heavy, man. I mean, you can't believe how wicked, how low down and rotten. Excuse me, but bullshit is the dropping of a cow or a bull. It's BS, it's lies, it's deceit. And the American people went to war in 1917, and black people sued to become a part of the war because we didn't want to be left out of America. So America signed us up to fight the war. And black men died, but they don't know what the hell they were dying for, and neither did the white ones know what they were dying for. But the man of sin gotta be revealed. And I thank God that he put it in my heart. I don't have no fear of those bastards. I want to expose them all. God is present. God is in the world. to you by my life that God has power to save. Don't worry about me. You better worry about yourself. Excuse my language, but they are bastards. They're illegitimate children of God. When America started borrowing money, they had to have a way to pay it back. And that's how they thought of the IRS. Then they started taking income tax. But by that time, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies had their money in trust funds, and they had found a way to get around paying taxes. But the taxes were for the poor and the middle class. It was a gradual income tax that was to keep on escalating. And in the same year, the FBI was established.
Come on, man. Come on.
You think the FBI is out here to fight crime?
Come on, man.
The FBI have done some of the most wicked criminal things in this country against the citizens of America. Who are you, Farrakhan? That you take on the unseen powers of the world to expose them to the light of day. Who are you? I say I'm your brother. I'm a servant of these two mighty men. The FBI has spied on and sought to persecute everybody, white or black, that tampers with control of the poor people.
That's right. That's right.
Whether you're communist, socialist, whether you have an idea that could stimulate the masses with truth, the FBI pounces on you.
Right on top.
In the same year that the FBI was established, the Anti-Defamation League was established. The Anti-Defamation League has been used to cover up and to fight against anybody that is not necessarily anti-Semitic, but anybody who will expose those Jews who have been at the root of the control of the banking system